my biggest spend.
Okay, we are live this morning. Oops, we got it. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is the Senate Transportation Committee. Friday, and March 11th, not the 13th. March 11th, and we are going to continue our discussion on the Burlington International Airport governance. And Anthea Cooper's with us this morning, so if you'd like to join us, please. We had a discussion the other day about it, as you recall, and we're continuing that. See what progress we can make on the subject of the Burlington International Airport being somewhat of a regional issue. So, morning, Anthea.
Okay, so for the record, Anthea Dexter-Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel, and I'm here today to talk about a language proposal that Senator Chittenden had mentioned when you were hearing from your witness about the Burlington International Airport and studying governance there. And then just before we start, I'm going to do a little disclaimer, which is I used to work for the city of Burlington as an assistant state attorney there, and I did do work for the airport. There is a January 1, 2020 memorandum that was put out by the city attorney's office on the Burlington International Airport and regional governance questions. That report was issued, or memorandum was issued, I think more than 2 years after I'd started working here. But if you go all the way to the last page, or page 40, in the very last footnote, it says, research and initial drafts of this document were prepared by Anthea Dexter-Cooper. That is totally accurate. I did work on that report. And all of that is to say that I used to know so much more about this from the perspective of the city of Burlington. I don't know very much about it now. If you do put this language that Senator Chittenden is proposing into the T-bill, I will be super interested to read the report. The origin of the language that Senator Chittenden is proposing is H52, which is a bill that has been introduced in at least 3 bienniums now by Representative Townsend and others. The first version of that language was drafted by my predecessor, Helena. So this idea has been out there for a while. I did not actually ever write this bill. I have simply just changed the years to advance by 2 each time the bill has been reintroduced. And in this instance, for Senator Chittenden, advancing it 1 year because it was introduced in the first year of the biennium. And then per your discussions that you had on, I think it would have been Tuesday, I've also included language in there that would have the retention of a consultant to work on and provide support in the preparation of the governance study. So it's pretty short, it's 3 pages. It very closely tracks just the standard study language that we use. So subsection A is going to create the Burlington International Airport Study Committee, and it tasks that study committee with examining the existing governance structure of the airport and the practicability of alternatives to that structure, and to then report its findings and recommendations. The membership of the study committee is to be 7 members. 1 member is appointed by the governor and is supposed to be a private citizen with expertise in airport-related matters. 1 member is designated by the mayor of the city of Burlington. 1 member is designated by the city council of the city of South Burlington. 1 member is designated by the mayor of the city of Winooski. 1 member is designated by the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission to represent other municipalities affected by the airport. And that person can neither reside in nor represent the city of Burlington, the city of South Burlington, or the city of Winooski, the Secretary of Transportation or designee, and then 1 member designated by the president and CEO of the Lake Champlain Regional Chamber of Commerce. So that's where you get your 7 members. The subsection C goes through the powers and duties of the committee. The committee shall examine the advantages and disadvantages of retaining the existing governance structure of the airport, which is it being under the city of Burlington, its municipal structure. 2, each alternative for changing the governance structure of the airport that is identified by a majority of the committee members as warranting study, the advantages and disadvantages of each alternative examined, and the steps and timeline required to implement each alternative. And then the final power and duty is to look at any other issue relating to the governance of the airport identified by a majority of the members of the committee as warranting study. Subsection D in H52, as it was introduced this biennium and in prior bienniums, just gave the study committee the assistance, the administrative, technical, and legal assistance of the Agency of Transportation. This is requiring the Agency of Transportation to contract with an independent third-party consultant with expertise in airport governance. And that's pretty broad. You certainly can make it more narrow. We're then getting to the places where I've updated numbers. The report would be due back on or before January 15th, 2023. The subsection F goes through the meetings. The Secretary of Transportation or designee shall call the first meeting of the committee to occur on or before July 15th of 2022. The committee shall select a chair from among its members at the first meeting. The majority of the membership of the committee shall constitute a quorum, and the committee shall cease to exist on January 16th, 2023. That's one day after the report is due. One of the things you might want to consider is if you think there could be follow-up to it, to extend that out a little bit. The reason why we have started in our template language, including this cease to exist language, is because then it saves the Sunset Advisory Committee from having to get rid of all these study committees that are still theoretically floating out there. But if you think you might want to give the committee something else to do and retain the membership, you might want to extend it out beyond just the day after the report. Subsection G is your compensation and reimbursement, and this is pretty standard for study committees. Members of the committee who are not employees of the state and who are not otherwise compensated or reimbursed for their attendance are entitled to the per diem compensation and reimbursement of expenses as permitted under statute for not more than 6 meetings. They could, theoretically meet more, but that's what the compensation is available for. And then you've got your authorization. Since this language is proposed to be included in the T-bill, not a separate appropriation, but saying that the payments allowed under subsection G of this section and up to $50,000 for the consultant shall come from monies appropriated to the Agency of Transportation for the policy and planning budget. That's Michelle's budget, and I'm sure she can tell you if there is room in there to cover the $50,000 for the consultant. I'm also sure she'll tell.
That shouldn't be an issue.
No, she'll say probably they need it, but that's, but then they can move under from one account to another.
$5 million under other.
That's nothing.
She also might theoretically say if it was something that was better suited to be in a different portion of the agency's budget. And that's it, 3 pages, study committee, report back January of next year, and the addition, the new piece beyond the idea that's been floating out there for at least 3 bienniums is the use of the consultant.
Questions, comments? Go ahead.
Anthea, do you know if it's ever had a hearing in the House? It's just been ignored.
So I think in the first year that it was referred, there were, and I wasn't here for that, there were sort of sister bills. There was a bill that, was going to create the study committee around the governance. And then there was also a bill with the noise and the requirements around having a noise compatibility plan and the noise exposure maps. And there was language that was proposed in a sister bill that would have amended the charters of the city of Burlington and the city of Winooski and maybe the city of Burlington, of South Burlington, I'm not sure, that would have had more involvement from the other municipalities in the development of this plan that needs to exist in order to get federal FAA money to do noise compatibility issues. So there were sort of these sister bills that were out there. Both of them were reintroduced in the next biennium. And then this bill was the only one that was introduced for this biennium. When the bills were introduced by Representative Thompson, she was the chair of House Government Operations, and the bill, I believe, bounced between GovOps and transportation before, I believe, settling in transportation. And Representative Townsend is now on appropriations, and she's not chairing government operations. So I think there might have been a little bit of, whether or not the bill should be taken up by one committee or another.
Well, we solved it by putting in the T-bill.
And then my understanding is, aside from drive-by walkthroughs, it has only had from the members saying this is my idea, it has never been taken up in committee.
Yes, go ahead.
My only question is the makeup of the committee, and I don't have a proposal, but I wonder if we would hear from anybody that might suggest different ones. The 2 things that come up to my mind is the Guard. I don't know if they need their own representation. And if there are the other towns, so the other towns get 1 person through the Regional Planning Commission, but the Regional Planning Commission may or may not sort of be controlled by the major cities that already have somebody on there. So you're asking them to appoint somebody. So I don't know. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying it's something that came to my mind. So is there a way to make sure those other towns are better represented? Maybe not. I'm not saying that. That's my only question is who's on the committee?
Go ahead.
So I really appreciate taking time on this, and what I thought would be if there was interest and support to move this forward, I'd be happy to, or we could ask Jeannie to invite, I think Mira Weinberger should definitely just be here, and I'd love to hear his thoughts on that piece, because they do run the airport. Ultimately, the mayor right now is running the airport, so hearing his ideas on who should be on there. And then Charlie Baker, so I think maybe Charlie Baker might be able to best address that. He is CCRPC, so he might have a good idea of if this is the right set, because he does a lot of committee work as well.
Maybe he would have 2 appointments instead of 1 or something.
Is it your intent to talk to the mayor or have him with us, or what would you like to do?
With your blessing, I will.
No, I just think what's the best way to go.
So the other municipalities affected by the airport, would that be Willis, potentially Williston? And is there
Williston, the other really.
Winooski has a designated one. It's Burlington, Winooski, and South Burlington
sorry.
would have their own.
Essex and Colchester are close, but Winooski really takes us around.
I think this is gonna be a real big win for Burlington. They could get out of the management of, and I think it's a big win for the state of Vermont if we could get regional in there, but a win for Burlington. I mean, this isn't punishment to Burlington at all. I mean, they could just step away and let management come in there and they could just wait.
They get their money.
They could stay home and wait for their check. They really could.
So unless somebody suggests otherwise, I will send some emails out CCing the chair, vice chair to Mira Weinberger, Charlie Baker.
Sure, I'm open to that.
There's no other. Yeah, I guess if there's.
Is there a
we can see
system?
if there's anybody else that cares. I don't know. What did you think about the
I also
color?
have spoken to Chair Helen Reilly of the city of South Burlington, a former state senator. She, since the airport is in South Burlington, she knows of this. So I think seeing if they would want, South Burlington would want to come in with.
Somebody from the South Burlington
Sure.
City Council.
If
If we knew somebody.
Well, there's a newcomer, but I don't know if he's.
Yeah, he's kind of a rookie.
He's kind of new.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know.
He's still looking for the bathroom.
Yeah, right. So maybe somebody else.
That new guy from South Burlington.
The new guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't understand.
Well, we have a little bit of time to do that because if we are planning to put it in the T-bill.
If we hear from the mayor and he hates it, then that's a different situation than if he looks like he's willing.
a lot different directions.
I think if he finds out he doesn't lose any money, maybe that's gonna be the big factor.
And this is just the study to look at. It's not making it.
Very soft approach. And the last thing I'll say that wasn't in your very eloquent setup is that in 2013, as I mentioned before, when Bob Kiss was the mayor and the Burlington Telecom thing was creating some credit issues for the airport, they formed a very well-staffed, who had rather than spoke to this strategic advisory committee, which one of their 4 recommendations was to do exactly this. So this is a result of that, which called for the state to work with regional partners to look at governance models for the airport. So this bill from MEDA was a result of an airport commission, strategic planning commission.
Okay.
There's
what
a
else
lot
we
of
need to do?
history. Years.
So, I'm looking at the charge here. Yeah, one of the things we just talked about, and I don't know whether it should be reflected, but the committee, should we put in some assurance that would, that what they would also examine, or how to any change in governance model would not create an adverse economic impact on the city. Because if the thought is you're gonna pick my pockets or take my revenue, we sort of reflected it in our conversation, but I'm thinking it might be explicit. It would be better to be explicit to make that statement. Yeah.
We definitely support that.
And on the charge, it says, "They'll examine the advantages and disadvantages." And then it says, "Each alternative for changing the governance structure that is identified." It doesn't specifically tell them to look for different alternatives. Do we just need to word that differently? Or I mean, they'll figure that out, I guess, but it just seems worded strangely.
And also, they don't, with the recommendations are down in, I remember E, I guess, shall submit written, the bar across the bottom is blocking it, but I think
With findings and.
Oh, sorry.
findings and recommendations.
I don't see that on the screen. So Senator Brooks, you were thinking that for subdivision 2, with each alternative for changing, that it should be something more explicitly saying, like.
But they should examine alternatives. It just says they should examine the advantages and disadvantages of the current structure, but it doesn't say they should examine new structures, just that if they identify them, they have to.
So I think you want into for the alternatives for changing the governance structure that identified by a majority of the committee, and for those, I guess we are getting it on lines 8 and 9. Advantages and disadvantages.
Each alternative.
Yeah. One
This is each alternative identified.
Examine, no.
One thing you might want to do is, being as how this bill, when it was written, H52 didn't have a concept of this consultant with expertise, you're almost taking that consultant out of the process of identifying the alternatives and just leaving it to the members of the committee. You might want to give a little bit more leeway to the consultant to also identify.
Well, we would, what's the purpose of having
Yeah.
one?
Okay.
Go ahead.
So there are reports in the 80s under Madeline Kunin, the state legislature did a report studying different governance models, and so did that 2012, 2013 one. There are really 4 alternatives. If we want to even go more specific and ask the consultant to guide the committee, there's status quo, state-owned, regional authority, or a revised model with a stronger governance commission. Like, do we want to get that narrow? Is that a better task force?
Sometimes we do put in language that says review the prior reports or something like that, so.
You could say at least the following, and then it would leave it open to.
We recognize a second South Burlington City Councilor is now in the room, since they were just talking about it.
No, that doesn't work.
But no, he's a new guy on the city
Yeah,
council.
well, when he hears we banned fuel oil. We just took a roll over there.
Sorry, missed that.
We're cutting trees right now.
You know anything about Senator Chit that we don't know about?
But he's a great advocate for the city of South Burlington.
No, we didn't.
We got out of 7 days.
Oh, God, where are you? Where you from, 7 days?
At least you're not asking him to sign your petition.
No.
Sorry, Russ.
I still think that 2 is worded a little weird.
Yeah, I'm just gonna rewrite it.
Well, let's move it out.
So I think what I'm gonna end up doing is, and I will send this language to Senator Chisholm to look at hopefully early next week. Keep it, instead of sort of presupposing, like retaining the existing governance structure as its own subdivision, have the committee with the assistance of the consultant look at least the following potential governance structures.
That have been identified in
And,
prior studies.
And we can reference.
And identified by their consultant.
And then adding language in there that would say that any recommendations would have no financial adverse impact on the city of Burlington.
I think that's important. I think that's important to know that we're not trying to punish them in any way. We're trying to come up with a good solution, and who knows, maybe they'll welcome that.
There's something about moving it to Newport or. I've got to watch that.
Well, I don't know about that.
Okay, Bobby. Yes.
From what you know, Senator Chin, that getting this done by January 15th is not a problem, since it's already been studied so many times.
I don't see problems with the dates, but I look to those with more seasoned experience with study force.
I would think that should be workable.
And if you look at your 6 meetings, it's about a meeting a month.
Sounds like we're making progress.
Yeah, wants to be on the committee.
Yeah.
I don't think I qualify for any of the appointment criteria.
I think it would have conflict,
Yeah.
zapping out.
Well, it sounds like we're making progress. It's a very important issue. We've talked about it for many, many years.
I think as a courtesy, we ought to share it with Michelle. If that's.
Yes, oh, no, that's fine, sure.
So I think I will hold off on sharing anything with her until you have given
Yeah,
her.
but
the
at some point, I think
Yeah.
we, you know,
I'll talk to the secretary also, just run it by them. I can't see anybody that would be negative on this issue.
hardly plowing new ground if they've already done, what, 3 or 4
No,
studies.
right.
It's just sooner or later, you act on something, or you say, forget it.
The legislature did act back in the 80s. They actually created the Airport Enterprise Fund and the Airport Commission, and then things just changed again 20 years later. So this is just a healthy thing every 20 years, based on the news that we've all seen about the
We
airport.
did deal with the revenue issue around the fuel sold on the airport and how it could be used, remember that federal.
I just think it's, when you look around again and you realize that when you do a lot of traveling or you have friends that like to travel and, you know, I just see that there's some of the way that things are going out of that airport, it's given opportunity to other airports around. You know, I see Plattsburgh, it's really growing and, you know, people are having no problems of going 3.5 hours down to Hartford or 2.5 hours to Manchester. I just think that, and at the end of the day, they'd really rather just fly right out of their own state. It's a lot handier, it's closer, and it's a thing about supporting your infrastructure of your state.
As long as our F-35 don't leave.
Yeah.
That's a hot topic all the time.
You're not wrong, and that's why I think this conversation doesn't have to be about the F-35, but certainly can be a part of it, but governance is separate from that issue.
Okay, where are we going now? We're all set on this issue for time being?
I have my marching orders.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's move on, unless I hear anything else. The franchise, we're back to that subject again. Any taxes coming on fuel, gasoline today or what?
Are you coming off of them or going on them?
You're in a tough spot this week.
I am.
Yes, I am. Price of gasoline. Was it up your way, Gene? You don't know. Yeah.
I haven't filled up lately.
I feel bad for some folks that fill their tanks now. Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
particularly with these pickup trucks or SUVs that only go 12 miles.
Fuel oil more than anything. I mean, you know, people can choose to stay home and, but they gotta eat their homes.
Where they could,
That and
Going to
propane.
work. I thought somebody was, even just a Subaru Forester, $75 to fill up there.
My son filled his pickup or his 1-ton pickup there. It was $140 yesterday with
I'm
diesel.
glad I pre-bought my fuel oil.
Yeah,
Good thing you get your coal in the cellar, you know what I mean?
that's right.
You still got some
You
coal.
can sell that and not on the sidewalk. I was
Yeah,
like,
I do, but I had to stop it because I was,
warm.
it was 75 degrees in the upstairs bedroom. It was like a hot summer night. I said, I can't stand this.
She must have a lot of coal in that basement, I'll tell
Well,
you.
I'm getting
You
less.
must have a big basement there.
I do. I have this Greek revival house and I had this,
You've been burning that coal now for 5 years.
well, it's a lot of work, let me tell you, and I'm getting older. Staggering up the cellar stairs with the coal, you know, the ash.
V-Trans just lined right up looking for a coal ash.
Yeah.
They're gonna use it as an aggregate.
Mhm.
Okay, Anthea, our favorite subject here, wow, okay, where are we on this
So
franchise?
my understanding was on Tuesday, you heard testimony from both the Alliance and from Beta, and you also heard a little bit of testimony from the DMV. And the marching orders that I got from that were to do a revision. It's not really a rewrite because mostly I was just deleting things, not rewriting anything, of the language that was put forth as draft 2.1, draft request 220589, to strip out most of what Veda had proposed in the suggestion box, and instead leave it with sort of three of their proposals that were the ones that they wanted this committee to act on. What I have done is I have highlighted in blue, so you'll see like that blue period at the end of line 8 changes. So the statement of the purpose used to be that it was going to amend the Auto Dealer Franchise Practices Act and create a direct motor vehicle shipper's license. Since that was not one of the recommendations that Veda is now asking you to move forward, that's why the statement of purpose changed. It's why the act changed. For the balance of it, if you'll remember, I have this like kind of complicated chart that's sort of tracking all of the summaries and responses that you've gotten through the suggestion box. I have updated it to reflect what proposals Veda in their March 7th, 2022 proposal really wanted to move forward. So it's very hard to read in the printout version. It's easier to read on a screen. But next to each of the Veda proposals that's hyperlinked to the original submission to the suggestion box, it says it's either it was preserved in Veda's proposal, or if it was deleted or it was amended, and the color highlighting will sort of track. So if you see this green highlighting, for example, you're like, I'm really interested in the information I was given about that earlier, you can look to the green section of your chart. So going through the language, this is all proposals and language that you saw when we went through the first draft of the bill. Nothing is being changed, things are just being taken out. So in 4086, this is going to track with Veda proposal number 2, which was to amend statute with regards to how new motor vehicles.
Oh, boy, we spoke of her. Here she is. Wow.
I think it helped that House Transportation is now on the floor. She gets a break.
How do we have the honor of having you here this morning, you know?
Stay away.
It's been too long, but since we had.
Well, she's been sleeping overnight in the House Committee, I guess. January, February.
They're glommed onto all the space, now they're glommed onto all the staff, I mean, honestly. And we've just given you your division a potential assignment.
Oh, well, okay.
That's why I showed up. That's why we
It's too late, we already decided.
Just in your spare time.
It's very minor though, I'll tell you, not what the House is giving you.
Oh, my.
I heard it's horrendous, what the House is giving you.
What to do, what?
What's that?
The house?
The House
We'll
bill,
find
the
out.
transportation bill is all, they said, they just loaded it with stuff that it'll take us weeks to get rid of.
And probably took that miscellaneous Christmas tree bill and imported most of it into the T
That's
bill.
what they're trying.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
So
So
we're doing our part, we're putting in the airport, now we're gonna put in this, so.
Yes, go
A
ahead.
question on what you just said. So you said all of this is removal. Is it removal from existing state statute or removal?
No,
from
no. So if you looked at draft 2.1, it had all, I think it was 7 of Veda's proposals. This only includes like 3 of their proposals, and one of them is even amended a little bit. It's still, and to be clear, if you are like looking at this chart, and the first portion of it was the recommendations from the Alliance, it's not adding what the Alliance had suggested. So it's still starting from the point of, you know, draft 2.1 was what the dealers wanted. This is now a subset of what the dealers wanted.
So is this more like this as working towards a compromise towards?
I cannot
new-
speak for whether it would be deemed
Probably
by the
not.
parties a compromise.
It's just, at least, it's just probably more of a proposal from Veda than it is to.
Well, yeah, and I guess it's probably taking a look at our laws relative to what has happened in other states and what seems to be reasonable, and out of that list, selecting the ones that we think should in fact be acted on. So I would imagine the Alliance would not endorse, they would like having 3 versus 7, but they
Right.
probably would prefer none.
Right.
So that's,
They're probably back towards the study committee.
well, that's what they proposed.
And then one of the things that I would suggest, if you want to sort of dive into the summary materials that I have provided, it will say, so for example, if we're talking about Veda 2, I say review with Alliance proposal 4. So both of them were proposing changes to the warranty and how the dealerships are compensated for doing warranty work. And one of the things, I'm just picking this because it's one where it's at a point for the audit look back window, and the manufacturers wanted to extend that audit window and the dealers wanted to shorten the audit window. So there were kind of competing proposals on even some of them. So there was not overlap where the manufacturers and the dealers were proposing the same change. There was overlap to the extent that they were proposing looking at some of the same areas. Okay, so section 1 is going to track with data 2, and this, as we were just talking about, has to do with how the dealerships are compensated for doing warranty work. I'm not going to go through all of this again. I'm happy to come back and talk about it, but I was sort of thinking this would be a little bit more big picture.
And is that, and before you walk through other states that had similar legislation, and this would be one area.
Yes, so other states have had similar legislation. I have in the summary documents, I looked at what California and New Hampshire had done for some of these. And I would certainly need to go back and refresh myself on some of this if you're gonna move it forward in the T-bill, which gives everyone a little bit of time. But the key change here is in existing statute, it says that the calculation of the retail amount customarily charged may be established by using this sort of formula of 100 sequential non-warranty customer paid service repair orders or 60 days of non-warranty customer paid service repair orders, whichever is less, covering repairs of not longer than a certain window. The dealer proposal has that not be a may, it say it shall be calculated in this way. So that's making a permissive formulaic calculation a mandatory. And then the other big change here is looking at what is included in the retail sales. And you'll see at the bottom of page 3 and to the top of page 4, a very lengthy list of things that would be, I can't remember if it's included or not included. These will, the retail sales that are listed shall be considered except for the ones that are then in that list. And you might want to hear from, if you really want to get into this proposal and understand it, talking to dealers and manufacturers as to what is currently excluded from the retail sale calculation there. And it could be something that's governed by an existing franchise agreement. The other language that you have here is what would happen in the situation. This is subdivision 3 added language on page 5. If a manufacturer is furnishing a part or component to a dealer at less than its normal and customary price, what kind of markup there could be on that free price. And this is one where the dealers did have a response. The manufacturers had a response as to why they think that would be problematic in terms of increased markup. And I referenced that in
One
the
thing I
summary
don't
chart.
like about the dealers, and I'm big supporters, there are dealers continuing to overprice the sticker price on the car. And that is very, very wrong.
I mean, in this environment where you're charging
Yes,
premium.
they are.
But haven't they done that, some of the cars you bought because they're such.
That's right. They were marking up, and they're still doing it. Some dealers are marking $10,000, $20,000 over sticker for that automobile, and that is wrong. Yeah, I mean, my own personal, that's different, but I'm just saying, the general public should not have to pay a penny over sticker. Stickers, that's there for a reason, and they got their markup. And when I see and hear about someone has to pay $10,000 over the sticker because of a shortage, that is wrong. And boy, I don't know what's going to be done about that. But one dealer told where he's advertising every night that his car franchise, all his dealerships offer the sticker price. And that's what they start off with. That's there for a reason, and that's wrong.
That's probably as much consumer protection as you can ever have.
Now it's happening. That bothers me a great deal. Talk about credibility. That's wrong. You can't take advantage of the public like that. But like I said, I don't have a lot to say about it. But personally, I feel it's really wrong for the consumer to walk in because they can't buy something. They can mark up a used car all they want. They can put whatever they want for a price of a used car. When it comes to you're supposed to be able to buy that car in St. Albans or Rutland or all the sticker price for that automobile. And I know it doesn't fit in here, but yes.
Part of my naivete, maybe you know this, but is price gouging against the law? Like if we're in a constrained environment where there's no vehicles, is there any type of regulation against overcharging when there's no new vehicles to an extreme?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Well, where are you getting it though, is secondhand used cars?
So used cars, that's fine. They can charge all they want. Used
Well,
cars.
no, but that's where
Yeah.
you're really seeing the
That's right.
increase in
That's right.
prices.
But
in
when
the
they
used
take a
car.
sticker price and mark it up, and I know, like I said, I know they're doing it in regular automobiles, and I know the car I bought, I didn't, but there was 30,000 over sticker price, and that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But that's it's always been a sore subject with me, and like I said, I respect the dealers, and I think they're great people, but some dealers do it, some, I guess majority aren't doing it, but there are some that take advantage of the situation.
It is happening with some electric cars because they're so rare.
I don't know what to do electric. I don't know.
I hear on some of the
Yeah, I would
forums,
imagine, if you want to buy it, you pay the, over the sticker, because.
Is it worse now in this environment?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's terrible. It's
Because of the scarcity of inventory.
Yeah, and that's, because like she said, there's some vehicles that dealers are only getting 1, 2, or 3. And, there's demand, people want.
You look at the car lots, they're just.
Yeah.
So, empty though.
I mean, you can get more for some used cars than you pay for them, in today's world.
That's why they say if you've got a
Yeah.
lease
Yeah.
and the lease provides a purchase price at the end, people can purchase at a very sweet price relative to the market, and then turn around and actually make a profit themselves.
Yeah, that's right. They're buying them and selling them. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
And then just to be clear, this language is not getting at that. This has to do with
No, I
repairs.
understand. I just had to bring it up.
Yeah.
It always bothers me, but no, this has nothing to do with that.
So then new language added as subdivision 5. This is the bottom of page 5, that a manufacturer shall not require, influence, or attempt to influence a dealer to implement or change the prices for which it sells parts or labor in retail customer repairs, because that is then the linkage to what the warranty repair rate would be. And then a manufacturer shall not implement or continue a policy, procedure, or program with any of its dealers in the state for compensation that is inconsistent with the subsection. I think that is maybe a belts and suspenders approach to language by saying you can't do anything that's inconsistent with the subsections that's telling you what you can't do.
That kind of gratuitous language.
We have gratuitous language in statute a lot. For whatever reason.
All right.
I would say that there are some of the language in the proposals that came from Beta, like saying something like, notwithstanding XYZ, I think there is some language in here that is not necessary, but it's, I think, being written from and proposed from the perspective of we really want to hammer home the point that you can't do anything that is inconsistent with the statute.
I understand. It's a mother saying I mean it.
Okay, and then subsection D, adding in at the end that the compensation needs to be at the rate set forth in subsection C, and that's where you're getting that shall mandatory calculation formula. Subsection E, this is where you're getting your changes to your windows. So the dealers are proposing the look back period to be 1 year following payment as opposed to 2 years following payment. You can see that on lines 14 and 15. And then you've got the other window that would be reduced from 18 months to 1 year. So those are the changes. This is everything that Beta included in proposal number 2.
Yes, go ahead.
On that previous point, the National Council of States and Leagues of Legislatures does show that a lot of states do have price gouging legislation, and Vermont does have one on petroleum and heating fuel products, and there are many that have abnormal economic disruption controls against price gouging. I want to try to pick this up this
I don't know
session.
what the answer is. I've asked the dealers at the meeting to consider what they're doing, 'cause like I said, I've always been a big supporter of dealers, and I think this committee has too, but it bothers me when I see them take advantage of it. And not all of them, I want to make that perfectly clear. Not all of them do, but there are instances where people are paying $10,000 over the sticker. That's wrong. Anybody in the room have any comments, anything that you want to add to this conversation this morning?
Mr. Chairman, Bridget Morris with Morris Government Affairs on behalf of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. Certainly, of course, we're opposed to this language. We have our own language in these three areas, and we would strongly ask the committee to reconsider, just given the fact that these all do add substantial cost to the consumers in the end. And it really is in the details in these three areas in particular. And we would just ask you to reconsider and potentially push it to a more detailed study or review with neutral parties or consumer groups that are represented as well.
Questions? Yes, go ahead.
Justin Johnson from MMR, representing General Motors. We're a member of the Alliance, but we've also taken specific interest in this and would agree that there's a lot of detail here and a lot of nuance to this, and we would much prefer that be studied more properly with all the players as opposed to just sort of going through without a lot of review. And just on the just a note on the markup piece, it's interesting. There was an article in the New York Times last week that said that in January of this year, 80% of the new cars sold in the US were marked up above MSRP, as opposed to 2 years ago when the number was 0.2%. So it was in the New York Times. I don't know what but it's just a sense of the challenge in some of that. That's all.
Okay. Larry, you can sit down over here if you want to. That's one point. The vice chair's power, the science team. Senator Chitney, you had a question?
A comment I make is that if we go further with this discussion of this language, I think what's the missing from this conversation, highlighted by the chair, is the consumer group. So I don't know if that I would look to the chair and the vice chair to understand our time capacity and where this language might fit with the remainder of the session. But I'd love to hear an agency that works on advocating for consumers and their take on this language if we go further in this discussion.
I went to the assistant AG, right?
We have heard from the AG's office on this. We don't really have anybody else, I think, that I know of, but maybe there are other groups. But we've heard from the AG because they do the complaints.
Okay.
Like for enforcement of 11 months. Did you have a question, Senator?
No, I was just looking for you, just looking for your.
I'm open to listening. That's it. It's a very touchy subject. I'll listen.
Did we formally hear from the Attorney General?
Last, before you, you're the new guy. You don't know.
Okay.
I was in a different class.
We did get we got a letter from them or something. Did we get an email or something saying like, we don't want to just, I thought we heard it from them this year.
Senator Mazza might have talked by phone.
The Attorney General called, one of the officers called me about 3 weeks ago and said that they could not get involved in a franchise discussion, be very cautious about that. And gave me a heads up. That's what I mentioned in the committee at that time, that because it's a franchise, they couldn't be involved. You have to buy for the franchise. That's why I said right along that let's be careful of what they agreed to and what we can have jurisdiction over. Because a franchise, if we get involved in a franchise, like whether it's McDonald's or whether it's anybody else in the country, rather than the state, we're treading on thin ice here, because how far can you go with a franchise agreement? If you ask, you sign the paper, says I'm getting 10%, and then we overstep that. So that's why it's not clear in my mind what our jurisdiction is and where we can go with this.
Well, I guess I do have one thought. And that is the testimony that we've just heard is telling us that this is going to have an adverse impact on the consumer.
Right.
I need to understand what it is that you would identify that would create that adverse impact, because there might be ways that we mitigate against it, but I don't know how to take that statement. So if you want to provide a memo to the committee for us to consider outlining how you see this has the potential to have a negative impact on Vermont consumers, I think we should hear in greater detail what is behind that statement.
Yeah, that's the last thing I want to do is go down the road that we don't have jurisdiction over.
We may even have, even if we don't, I don't want to be doing something that we don't understand what the impact or collateral impacts are. Even if another committee wants to look at it, then we can say, yes, we examined that. This is, what we heard, this is, and so forth, and we balanced it out. Right now, a general statement about it'll hurt the consumer is very hard to understand without a bit more information. So if we could get a written communication that helps us understand that with greater definition, I would find that important to our discussion.
Yes,
And if you could just scroll down to the next page, because I think this next change, scroll, up, I guess, up or down, depending on your perspective.
Oh my God.
Going back to like.
No, going to a higher page number.
Okay, high page number.
This is as bad as a migraine.
So I think that B change, which just prohibits the manufacturer from having them redo their showrooms more than 10 years, which one question I have is, how does that conform or not to other states, if you know that? And then if there's a question on, if this is what's the word I'm looking for, when this would take effect, if it's 10 years regardless. So if it takes effect on July 1st and they just renovated the building in June, is it 10 years? Or like if 10 years is up at that point? So that's one question I have.
Yeah, so there's language in the Auto Dealer Franchise Act that was added the last time there was like a substantial rewrite of it, that I think says something along the lines of, I need to go look at it, like the changes in this act apply to all contracts that exist. And one of the concerns that you're always going to have when you've got the changing of, so you've got this law and then it's regulating the franchise agreements that you have between these two entities, your manufacturers and your dealers. And you could be facing a contract clause problem if you're changing this like existing contract. You could, in your implementation language around this, have a delay on it, and it could be you're deemed to comply for 10 years. You could even do if it's been this many years, then it's only, so that means like you could get sort of into the weeds on it. You could also have a delay on the whole thing and say it would be applicable to contracts entered into or renewals entered into after a particular date. But just because you jumped ahead to one topic, I'm just going to say Section 2 deals with, so Section 1 was dealing with the reimbursement rates for warranty repairs and stuff like that. Section 2 is dealing with the requirements that placed on dealers, as you just said, with respect to like making improvements to their dealerships or having to purchase tools and stuff. So it's sort of like the two pieces of this are the reimbursements and then the facility repairs.
And I thought the reason I wanted to jump to that, not only had those questions, but I thought when we talk about impact of the consumer, I see this one as helping the cost of the consumer because it lowers the cost to the dealer, but the dealer isn't continuing to have to renovate their building. That's less money that they have to collect from those buying cars. So this would be, to me, an example that would lower costs for the consumer. No? I want to hear from the.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Sure.
So I would just like to say that on all three of these areas, if the committee wishes to really get into the details, I would prefer to have our attorney, David Bright, who really is the expert, come back and be able to sit with you in person or on Zoom. I can speak sort of anecdotally about these areas, like the one you're just talking to, the way that Beta's proposal is written. Basically, the way we read it is that if somebody is deemed in compliance for 10 years, even if the manufacturer offers another incentive program, they still have to pay that manufacturer for complying if it's happened within that 10-year period, even though they don't have to do anything. Because they already updated and were in compliance 9 years ago on something else. Now we order them to do it again, and we still have to pay them for that because they're deemed in compliance, even though they haven't done anything. So that's one area where it does add cost to the manufacturer that gets passed down to the cost of the automobile. So on the other one too, with the The warranty work,
I guess we need to have more testimony. I pay, the manufacturer will be paying the dealer.
if they offer an incentive program, they would pay them to upgrade in some ways. They're offering them certain incentives that have monetary value, which the way that this is written could be understood that somebody's already in compliance. If they once complied with the renovation for an incentive program 10 years ago or within that 10-year time frame, they don't have to actually upgrade again, even though there may be a new incentive program. If that makes sense. So that's what I'm trying to say is it
It's
really.
the last sentence of being entitled to all incentive or home offered. That's what you're referencing in your comment.
Yes, and it's basically, it's this level of detail and granularity that, you know, I really would prefer to have our franchise attorney as part of this conversation if possible.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to derail that line of thinking, but I'm surprised that there isn't, I'm new around here, and I've been exposed to the usual suspects. In Senate education, there's just groups of individuals that represent very important constituencies. There's no consumer advocacy group that has a presence in the building, like Consumer Reports or some other agency besides the AG? None? Okay.
Not on all consumer issues. I think maybe on specific consumer issues there are.
Okay.
I would just add to that, Senator, and we have talked to, say, just, you know, different groups around, like Beaver, just to mention it. It's just not on their priority list right now. They haven't really had a chance to get into it. And I know there were 2 national consumer groups that did submit comments to the DMV suggestion box this summer.
Yeah, so if you go and you click on like pretty much anything of the hyperlinked things in these big bars that go across, that'll take you to the suggestion box report. The DMV got responses from 4 groups: dealers, manufacturers, and then 2 industry groups that commented on this, not saying make this change or that change to your statute, but on the broader issues of what the state law and the relationships between dealers and manufacturers have on other entities. I did not include it in the chart, in part because it was just what the statute changes were going to be, because that's what I do. I change statutes. I don't know about all of the positions that people have from a policy perspective. But if you're interested in reading those, literally any of the big bar links will get you to it. And I believe that they are sort of in the middle of the 4.
Claire, you got a comment?
Sure. You know, as far as consumer protection, we're happy to submit some additional information about how the dealer franchise law and motor vehicle dealer franchise law is absolutely protects the consumer, especially the warranty provisions. Absolutely, if the dealer isn't paid for their warranty at a reasonable rate, then they're going to shift that cost to the consumer who's a non-warranty. I think it's in the interest of the state of Vermont to make sure there are dealers available to do the warranty work and recall work. And as a result, I think that's why the statute is so important. Literally every state in the country has a warranty statute like this. And it's because if you don't have it, the manufacturers are not going to pay. They're going to try to not pay the dealers, and that's going to hurt your consumers. But as far as, and so we're happy to put additional information in about consumers and how this protects consumers. I've worked on franchise issues in this building since the last time you guys did this bill. And I can't remember when that was, but it was at least 15 years ago. I've also done the farm equipment dealership franchise bill and the beer franchise bill. Those are all in state law. And I can say that it's usually industry, fighting industry. The AG's office has never really been involved in any of those. And there has never been a consumer group in Vermont that has been interested. And honestly, I'd really like you to look under the hood on one of those groups that submitted comments that says something like the dealer franchise law is going to cost the state billions and billions and billions of dollars. And I did some research. They have this kind of really funny name, like Consumers, blah, blah, blah. And it's run by this guy who was a lobbyist for AT&T, and it just surprised me. I would just think that group, and I can tell they also submit comments in other states, almost verbatim to what they put into Vermont. And then there's another woman who put some comments in about a recall issue that I was actually scratching my head on, because I'm like, I was trying to figure out in state law where we have that issue in Vermont, and I don't think we do. But it really was, it wasn't directly related to franchise. So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm interested in a consumer take as well. To my knowledge, consumers, at least in Vermont, historically have not weighed in on these issues. But we believe that the franchise law benefits significantly the consumer.
Chairman, I would just like to add, yesterday I was looking at Vermont Business Magazine and this article about Attorney General Donovan reveals top 10 consumer complaints of 2021. This is Consumer Protection Week. Number 1 is motorized vehicles. So I don't know what the breakdown is there between where it falls, if it's manufacturers, if it's dealers, if it's used vehicles, but it'd be interesting to know. I mean, it is an issue, and there is a consumer angle to this, and I don't know who to turning to, but.
So it's warranty phone calls is what people are complaining about, but I think I heard that on BPR, that extend your car warranty.
Right. And
that we're all getting.
And if
Even
you
for a
want to
15-year-old car.
If you want to know more about those consumer complaints, you can probably talk to the executive director of the Vermont Auto Dealers Association, which runs a consumer complaint program with the Attorney General's office. And directly, if any of those complaints that a consumer files against a car dealer relate to one of the members of the ADA, they take it and they often settle it. They often get, but they also have a board that looks at it. It's binding on the dealer. It is not binding on the consumer, the decision. So the consumer can go forward and do whatever they want, but they do resolve a lot of those disputes and take very seriously consumer complaints. I am very familiar with those. Over the years, I've had to go through those complaints. And we do take them very seriously. They're not about the franchise law. I mean, they're about someone who bought a vehicle from a dealer and then had some kind of issue with the vehicle, or that's usually what those disputes are about, not does the franchise law reimburse a warranty claim at a certain level. But we do, for our members, take those claims very, very seriously and work very hard with the Attorney General's office to resolve them.
Senator Ingalls.
I just pulled up the top 10 complaints as by our AG Donovan, and 199 of them are motorized vehicles, but it's more of the inspection process. 187 are retail as number 2, home improvements 132, health and medical 83. So I mean, a state of 650,000 people with 650,000 motor vehicles on the road to have only 199 complaints, I don't think it is something that we're gonna change legislation for, or I wouldn't believe that we would. So yeah, it's a very small percentage of what gets on that, what gets repaired every day.
Okay, where are we now? We're getting deeper and deeper in the hole here.
So I'll just finish my very quick walkthrough. We're almost done. We skipped ahead a little bit, but so section 2, this tracks with Veda's first proposal, and within Veda's first proposal, they amended it in this iteration to take out the written assurance that was required that they would get the full return on the investment. That has been removed. And then the other piece that was removed is the requirement to purchase specific tools and equipment to service motor vehicles without demonstrating that they will get the reasonable return on investment. But aside from those two removals, what you see is Veda's first proposal from the original suggestion box. And then, and that has to do with, when you're required to make repairs and the deemed in compliance language. And then finally, you've got their last proposal, section 3. This will track with Veda's Third proposal, this is preserved in its form, and it's to say that it will be considered unreasonable for a manufacturer to fail to take into account all circumstances relevant to a new motor vehicle dealer's local market when imposing standards of performance. And you did get a response from the Alliance on this one in addition to the other proposals. And all that you're seeing in blue is that things have been removed from the earlier version of the bill, which was the full, I believe it was 7 proposals from Beta. And then the effective date, we talked about this a little bit earlier with the contracts clause piece. It shall take effect on July 1, 2022.
Is that last one in other states?
The unreasonable standards piece, I have from my research, which again, like I just did not have time to
I'm
look at.
talking about local market, because I don't know, I imagine there used to be more dealerships up in Essex County. There are very few people in Essex County. I'm just wondering exactly what that test of local market means in practice. That means it would protect the dealership that's only selling 10 cars a year?
So I looked to language that California had. California requires performance standards to be reasonable in light of all circumstances, and then it lists specific ones. And a written methodology needs to be provided by the manufacturer to the dealer. And then from the Alliance's submission, they looked to the New York Vehicle and Traffic Law, saying that while other states may have similar requirements on unreasonable standards, the example given by Beta, New York, is limited to the franchise and not other voluntary programs. So it's got a narrower scope of applicability. I certainly could bring up the language from California. The reason why I looked at California, even though I know that the Alliance and dealers were looking more in our regional area, was just that California's had to rewrite fairly
Yeah, it's
recently.
just a local market. It's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you could have, you're saying, Senator Kitchell, this way they had one Chevy dealer in Island Pond, they sold 10 a year, and one person complained, 10% of all complaints, that somebody's unhappy with, and that certainly could throw them over the top as far as.
Well, isn't it more than for example, years ago when there was a reduction and they actually was trying to reduce the number of dealerships.
Yep.
And I thought we had testimony from the transportation board around that. I think it was Stone, was it, the dealership?
I actually came down and testified here at that time.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering the extent to which you could have, a very small sales. And we were surprised at some of the years ago, we were doing something else, but I think it was around the dealer plates.
Oh, yeah.
How many
Yeah, they plates,
dealerships
yeah,
were
yeah.
getting these plates, and in fact are only selling just a handful of cars a year.
20 dealer plates.
And they had, and they sold 6 cars. So I guess I just, is that local market, is that a common phrase that's used in other states?
I am not sure what I took it down was to make you dizzy. I'm looking to see if anything with market area is defined in the definition section for chapter 108. There are people in this room who know a lot more about, it's only relevant market area that's defined for purposes of chapter 108.
We all probably have got the feedback on recalls, airbags and all that.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you how many I got, but anyway, Ford says to me, they said a recall, Bocan, Ford, St. Albans does house calls. They'll come to your place and fix your airbag.
Well, that's handy.
And I said, wow, that's great. So I called Bocan a month ago and they answered, they will get back to you, but they never called back. A month later, I called Bocan and the same thing, I had left them, never called back. Finally, this week, I get a call from Ford, but what surprised me, I never got a call from them because they sent all these notices. So the lady on Ford, it says about recalls. And I said, well, I called Bocan. You have it on here because Ford sends me a notice that says Bocan does it, but direct from Ford. I said, I have it right in front of me that Bocan does for the house calls. And she said, well, I'll take care of that. So she called Bocan, I guess. Bocan said, no, we don't do it. So it's coming from Ford. But she said, I'll tell you what, I'll put you to Heritage for it. They do them. So she switches me over to Heritage. Heritage says, no. There's a communication gap between Ford and your Ford dealerships. You know, I don't know what's happening here, but it was strange because they're putting their name right there, in bold letters, and you call them, they'll come to your house. I thought that was great. I don't drive these cars in the winter. And, so that was, so that may be a complaint. I don't know. I didn't complain, but. Okay, so where are we? Yes.
So just closing the loop on what I was saying from the definitions. So there is a definition of relevant market area. I don't want to, speak for the entity Purveda that proposed this. I don't know if relevant market area as a defined term could be a stand-in for what is meant to be captured by local market. I wouldn't want to rewrite their language aside from sort of fitting into our drafting standards, but that is a defined term. If local market were to be something different than relevant market, it certainly could be something that you defined or had more clarity on from a drafting perspective.
So relevant market does have a definition.
Yeah, it means the area within a radius of 25 miles around an existing dealer or the area of responsibility defined in the franchise, whichever is greater. And then it goes on to what would happen if they were seeking to establish additional new dealers and there are more of them closely populated. So I don't know if relevant market area as it's defined in 9 VSA. I'm saying this more to, if Claire wants to report back 408516.
That's Vermont statute you were just
That's
saying.
Vermont statute.
Why would we not want to keep a consistent terminology? I don't, I'm just raising it in terms of introducing another term into the statute.
I always like.
And I guess I can understand because it also serves as a protection that they're not putting another dealership right next door.
Well, so there is statute language in chapter 108 that addresses this. This is different. It's about sort of the determination of what the manufacturer is going to expect of the dealer. And I don't know if the use of local market here, which there probably could be considered to be some ambiguity since we're now having a conversation about it and we're not entirely sure what local market is meant to cover, if it was meant to be the same as relevant market area. Because if you think about it, you've got dealerships that are located within certain areas and maybe they've got a broad reach, but people go and buy cars from dealers that are in other parts of the state or other areas all the time. So maybe the local market is meant to be more encompassing than relevant market area, and I wouldn't want to speak for Beta on that. But I do think you have uncovered something that if this language is put in statute, we probably want to have more clarity there so that everyone understands what is meant there and we're avoiding.
And why that term is being used as opposed to one that already exists in a different part of statute.
So I think we have interested parties that want to know where we're going from here, and I'll just say as one new senator, I would not feel comfortable supporting this language, though I am very sympathetic to the dealers. From conversations I've had with Senator Ingalls, who's had experience, as other dealers, I think there's something to be done to make this a level playing field for the manufacturers. But I could support this without hearing. I would love BPERC if they would commit some energies, maybe not for the whole committee, but to educate me on not unbiased, but a consumer lens on these changes.
I
That's
don't want to
all.
go down the wrong road here. I don't want to go down the wrong road. I'm trying to get some consensus of what the issues are, because number one, probably doesn't involve this committee. That's number one. I want to make that perfectly clear because we got this thing, but does it really involve us? I think it has to go elsewhere. And I know the other committees are busy, but that's not reason enough to say that we make a decision on franchise laws in this committee. I want to make that perfectly clear. We spent a lot of time on this issue because we want to have a fair balance with all the dealers in Vermont and the manufacturers. So even if we come to some conclusion, I think it has to go somewhere else for clarification on the legality of it. This is not our jurisdiction. I want to make that clear because it's something I'm not promoting. That's why I thought the Attorney General's call was important. But I didn't get details with them because he just gave me a heads up. So if we go any further, I want to be very cautious about this. I'm not comfortable about putting this bill out. I want to be perfectly clear about that. It doesn't belong here. We deal with transportation issues. And I don't know if that involves transportation issues by contracts. That's my personal opinion.
I'm of the same mind. I don't feel comfortable with what I know about this as of now.
It's a big undertaking. I just don't know where we're going with it. So at that point, I don't know what else we can talk about this morning. There's something else we want to continue this discussion, or how do you want to do this? Senator Birchlick, I know you've been involved, and I respect that. What would you like to do?
I think we'll just have to talk about it some more, talk to the data, the alliance, and see if there's a path forward.
Okay, I think that completes unless someone else has anything else to offer this morning at this time. Set. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Thank
Anthea.
you, you were welcome to come as well.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
I think we are
Appreciate
the
it.
little elves in the background that help you
was
make
involved in
government.
Description thing, but
Thank
they're
you.
really focused on the, electric cars.
Thank you.
So I don't think-
See ya.
You can talk to them.
Now we have Michelle here. Wow, boy, we haven't had this opportunity all year.
I hope you brought that $50,000 we put into
Wow,
the
we're
set.
spending 50,000.
I looked into that and
Okay.
No?
I have some
I'll tell you
recommendations.
what, I'll tell you what.
It was travels fast.
We'll do 10% of what the house is spent on these, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I can show you.
And I'll get you on the.
Just
I can share
we'll
that.
take 10%.
Oh, yeah, it's showing. It's
They'll be
whatever
asking
you
to
want.
Yeah, I-
testify on
I know the issues, I could just perhaps.
You let Brad work.
Actually, no, I didn't. Helena did, and I made the teeny little yellow changes.
I can say-
So now I can say I worked on it. I previously